Well, good morning and welcome to yet another Old Ruin Travels. Today you find me back in Perthshire. I'm outside the small village of Comrie at a place called Cultybraggan. Now, Cultybraggan was mentioned as a hunting ground for James V of Scotland, and he was here in September 1532. But in 1941 it became quite an important place, and we'll go and have a look and see why. In 1941, the British Army took over Cultybraggan. It was part of a farm. What they did here was create a prisoner of war camp. It was known as a black camp and held the most ardent Nazis during the Second World War. There were only 2 camps in Scotland of this type, the other being up in Caithness in the north of Scotland. It really does feel like a high security area even today. The camp was built in 1941 by the 249th Pioneer Corps, mostly consisting of Jews who had fled either Nazi Germany or Austria. Apparently they're going to be turning all of these huts into accommodation as well, and refurbishing the old mess hut for the officers, turning it into a restaurant. Haven't seen such niceness in huts since the Italian chapel in Orkney.
Quite into the wasp season again. Last year we had, you know, as you come into this camp, just on your left, you might have noticed there's a sort of reap.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a super story in that little book in front of the camp book. That's got visitor stories, and one of them's it's the one open actually. One of them's from 1960, and it just simply tells you what happens when things don't quite go right when you're in a training camp for the military. That's the top left one, by the way.
Yeah.
You enjoy a good laugh, and I mean, there's dozens more, right? There are other stories as you go down, and one of those about the very young German POW who was taken out and taken to Crieff to enjoy an art of the cinema. His host then bought him a fish and chip supper.
Yeah.
And they dressed him up in Morrison's school outfit. But yeah, he was admittedly one of the trusty prisoners here, but it's a slightly unlikely story, but it is absolutely true. So we've got lots of other stories, including about some of the individual prisoners who were here. Some of them are in the guidebook, but the man called Heinrich Steinmeier left his whole estate as a gift to the elderly people of Comrie Village, to thank them for their kindness while he was a prisoner here. He was actually SS when he arrived here, and he died not all that long ago. And one of the things to be able to buy for him from it, so the cartoon on the table there. Oh yeah, that's called a trishaw, and a volunteer from the village takes elderly people around, to just want a bike ride out and a chat, or he takes them to the doctors or the shops or whatever. So we bought that out to start my fund, and one of the last things we bought out to start my fund was a very simple heating system for this building.
Across in the distance over there was where the lower risk prisoners were held. They used to go out to the cinema. As in most of my adventures, this cannot be avoided.
Yeah, no, I don't watch the new ones.
Thank you again.
What are you doing?
I'm not going to enjoy this. One of the darkest things that happened here at Cultybraggan was the death of Wolfgang Rosterg. He was sent here by accident along with conspirators in the Dividers plot. It was wrongly thought that he had informed on the plot, which had subsequently failed. Rosterg was known to have anti-Nazi views and spoke openly against Hitler and Nazism. Because they believed that he was a spy, some of his fellow POWs held a kangaroo court where he was found guilty of treason. He was then beaten and lynched. 6 POWs were found guilty of his murder in a military court. One was sentenced to life imprisonment and the other 5 were executed at Pentonville Prison. The last mass execution in Britain. Right, it's time to move on. I want to go and see something which is the oldest in the world. Yes, in a little village like Comrie. The Earthquake House. That little building on the outskirts of Comrie is known as the Earthquake House. Let's go up and see if we can see a bit more. Despite the weather forecast, no rain. This is known as a kissing gate. So what's the story behind the Earthquake House and why is it here? Well, Comrie lies on the Highland boundary fault and suffers more tremors and quakes than anywhere else in the UK. By 1911 the earthquake house was made redundant, but in 1988 it was recommissioned with modern equipment and has been here ever since. This was the first dedicated earthquake observatory in the world. The first seismometer was invented in Comrie in 1840, and 32 years later this was built. Well, thank you so much for following along today again. I didn't expect to end up back in Perthshire quite so soon, but here we are. So that was two pieces of history, roughly 102 years apart. Hope you found it interesting. And remember to subscribe to my channel. I love it when I get a new subscriber. So we'll see you next week. Again, I don't know where I'm going, but I want you with me.